Hey everyone, my name is Evander and welcome back to another Amiibo sculpting video. Today we're making Meat Boy from the Super Meat Boy franchise of games. We're going to start with a cylinder with only 6 sides and make it roughly the height of the body and the width of the leg. Then we'll extrude it up and duplicate another one right below it to line up with the leg. We'll cut the top one in half and mirror it over to the other side. Then with clipping on, we'll select the inner edges and drag it over to the center to create one piece. In a lot of the promo art, Meat Boy looks like a cube on top with cylindrical legs. I originally tried this, but it proved really difficult to get the top and bottom to join cleanly. But I found that creating both pieces from the same base geometry solves that problem, while still retaining a similar enough shape to the original. Next we'll mirror the leg to the other side of the body and begin connecting the vertices that already line up. Make sure to delete the top of the leg cylinder before doing this. I don't think that I did that in this video, but learn from my mistake. We'll fill in the remaining space by creating an edge loop near the center of the body so that we can fill in the front to the back. Any remaining holes can be filled by creating extra edge loops where necessary and connecting up the gaps. Don't worry about clean topology too much here, as this will just serve as a base for our sculpt later on. Now just fill in the empty space on the top of the head and our base model is complete. For the arms, I decided to make them from curves for ease of posability since they're so short. So create a curve with relatively high resolution and place it at about the height of the arm, then increase the depth and pose it into place. We'll eventually convert these into geometry, but for now these are a perfect placeholder. Don't bother mirroring the arm this time, as they're both in different positions anyway, and they may need a different amount of segments. We can now start moving our base model closer into what the final pose will be. For this amiibo, we're going to be basing the pose off of the promotional art for Super Meat Boy Forever. For the hands, we'll create the basic shape from primitives and then bool them together before sculpting them with dynamic topology. While we will be retopologizing everything, the shape of our sculpt is pretty final from this point on. Meat Boy seems to be made of both blocky and perfectly round shapes, and I tried to keep that aesthetic going through the hands. While the hands will be in different positions in the final pose, we can take a little shortcut and duplicate the hand over to the other arm. I made the eyes from squished UV spheres and pushed them about halfway into the body. Like the arms, the eyebrows are also made from curves, but this time with a lower resolution and extruded out. This allows us to move the eyebrows around easily until we get the right expression. In the next step, we'll convert these curves to geometry and bool them into the head and sculpt it all together with dynamic topology just like we did with the hands. There's just one major part of the face left to sculpt, and if you haven't already guessed, it will be the mouth cavity. There's a million ways to do this, but the best one I found for this sculpt is to take a thin draw brush set to negative and draw the shape of the outline of the mouth that you want. Then you'll trace a mask around that exact same shape, invert it, and use a strong, large draw brush to push in that part of the mesh. Then we'll just smooth it over with dynamic topology. We've got the mouth in place, but we still need to fill it with teeth, so to do this we'll create a cylinder and resize it down to the width of the mouth and squish it down into the shape that we need. Then we'll just delete all the sides that aren't going to be seen or just aren't needed for this shape and move it into place. We'll do the exact same thing for the bottom row of teeth with slight adjustments so that they don't look exactly the same. Finally, we'll convert our arm curves from earlier into meshes and bool them together with the fists. Then we'll just use dynamic typology set to the same resolution as the fist and smooth out the rest of the arm. Now it's time for the trickiest part of any sculpt and the part that I'm the most inexperienced with, and that is retopology. For this, I used the add-on Retopoflow 3, where there's a free experimental version on GitHub, link in the description. I highly recommend downloading this add-on even if it's just the experimental version. I'm not sponsored by CG Cookie who makes this add-on, and it's also my first time using it, but I really never want to retopologize without it again, as retopology is one of the most tedious processes in 3D modeling, as any 3D modeler will probably tell you. Lots of things can go wrong, and it kind of feels like solving a Rubik's Cube where if you just make one mistake, it messes up everything else. Don't get discouraged by this part of the process, as this took me a couple tries that I'm just not showing on camera. To be honest, even my final retopology isn't perfect, but it's good enough for something that won't have to move. Really, I'm just trying to get a smooth looking mesh that's easy to work with. Another thing to note is that I can't really give out many tips for this part of the process, as I'm still pretty new to it as well. But through these videos, I hope to improve my retopology skills, and someday I'll be the one giving advice. But for now, you'll just see me kind of playing it by ear and doing my best to get all these edge loops to line up, which they don't. But that's okay. I'll see you in the next step. Now let's move on to the fun part, materials. You can see I've laid in some simple colors here taken from some reference images. The node setup for the vinyl texture is really simple. Just run a noise texture through a bump node and then plug it into the normal of the principal BSDF. Run another noise texture into a color ramp node and crank that black value up a little bit. Then plug the color ramp into the bottom color slot of a mix RGB node set to overlay with a value node in the top set to 0.35. Then plug that mix RGB node into the roughness. And there you have it, a simple vinyl texture that you can reuse for any toy sculpt that you want to do. For the highlights of the eyes, we'll just do a simple image texture. Start by marking a seam at the center of those squished UV spheres we made for the eyes earlier, and then unwrap the UVs. Then in the texture paint tab, create a new image and give it a name. Now save the image and apply it in the shader tab to your eyeball. Then we're going to go into the texture paint tab and just paint in those highlights. We can reuse this texture for both eyes, or if you want to have some slight difference, you can redo it. But for this video, I'm just going to use the same texture twice. Work smarter, not harder. The inner part of the mouth is the biggest reason why it was important to retopologize the mesh, as we wouldn't have been able to texture paint it like this if we had not done that. Or at the very least, our UV map would have been disgusting. This is completely optional, but I thought it'd be fun to add the bandage that we see in promo art when Meat Boy is damaged. To do this, all I did was subdivide two planes, shrink wrap them to the head, and then solidify each one. Then I just applied all the modifiers, and there you go, easy bandage. For the base, I thought it'd be fitting if Meat Boy stood on top of the iconic buzzsaws from the game. It also helps that these objects are circular, so they naturally fit with the form of the base. All I did was bring in a circle that had 24 points and shrink every other one. Then I simply cut a hole in the center and made a few more circles so that I could recolor the material to the color of the saw blade. Then just subdivide till you get something smooth. Interesting tidbit about these saw blades here, there's a little seam in between the top and bottom edges, and that was not intentional, but it did make it look more like a toy, so I kept it. I love a good happy accident. That's gonna do it for all the 3D modeling in this video. Let's jump into the packaging. For the Meat Boy on the cover, we're gonna use the one from the promo art where we got the pose from. The only problem is, to do an 8K render, we're going to have to up-res this guy quite a bit, and that's going to be a long, tedious process of vectorizing by hand. A process that I won't go into detail here, but I will show the sped up version while I talk over it. I usually start by trying to block out as much of the basic shape as possible, and then from there it's just a lot of tedious masking and layer management, and to be totally honest, for projects like this where I probably won't ever open up the project file again, my layers are a mess. I don't bother organizing them. I just kind of know where everything is for the moment and do it until it looks right. I do try to group basic things like separate objects such as the front fist, body, and back fist, but everything else in between is kind of a jumbled mess. And no, none of my layers are named. And there you have it, a crispy, infinitely scalable Meat Boy that was a pain in the butt to make, but well worth the effort. For the rest of the box art, we'll be using the same template as normal. I decided to go with an all red and black aesthetic for this box art as I really like how striking that color combination is, and it just fits really well with Meat Boy. It's also a more minimalist take on Amiibo box art design, which I think is fitting for a simple 2D character like Meat Boy. We'll just have some abstract saw blades in the background for the back panel, and that'll do the job. For the panel that'll be obscuring Meat Boy, I grabbed the Super Meat World art from Super Meat Boy. I think it works really well compositionally, and it just brings in a little bit of that Edmund McMillen bizarreness that we all love. Then for the logo, we'll just bring in a transparent PNG of the Super Meat Boy Forever logo I got off Wikipedia. Then for Meat Boy's name, I went with the Press Start 2-player font that's free on Google because I think the pixel aesthetic matches the logo nicely. Usually I try to find the official font from the game, but because Meat Boy is so cartoony and still in the style of a Flash game, I actually could not find this typeface. The closest thing I could find was this Twitter post, and I think it's more of a joke than anything. Or at the very least, this typeface is not publicly available. Lastly, my favorite part of the box art design is this middle stripe here that divides the front and back panel. For a shape with a swooping motion like this, I thought what better than a blood streak just like the one that follows you in the game. For this, I downloaded a free vector splatter brush online and used a PNG of a blood splatter that I vectorized and then merged together with the stroke. Lastly, I brightened up its color so that it stands out from the background a bit. For the back of the box art, we'll just do the standard background to fill in that middle rectangle there, drop in a frame of gameplay, and then place the logo next to it. Oh, and we also changed the color of those top and bottom stripes to be that same dark red that we see recurring throughout this packaging. That's a detail I usually almost forget to mention, but it is important as if I left it the same color as the previous amiibo I worked on, it would definitely be noticeable. And that'll do it for the packaging. Guys, I just want to say thanks so much for all the responses that you've been giving down in the comments below, and all the people that have subscribed in my past couple videos. I never thought that I would be the kind of person to make YouTube videos, and to be honest, it feels weird to even say that while I'm sitting down here behind my laptop recording this. So really, thank you. I mean, we already hit 100 subscribers in like 3 videos, that's crazy. There's plenty more to come. I'm glad you all are enjoying it so far, and like always, let me know in the comments down below what character you'd like to see next. That's all from me. I hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.